Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 3023-4-603. This is a double acting spring hinge, a little bit unusual because it is a half surface type hinge is what this is. Double acting spring hinge is what it is. It's a double acting spring hinge at a 4-inch size that's half surface in a zinc finish. Let's go over it. First of all, 3023 inherently means that this is what we would call a half surface hinge. This is what the hinge would look like when the door is in the closed position. Now the -4 is a reference to the size of the hinge, but don't get hung up on the fact that it's 4-inch. The important part to know is how thick is the door that this is being asked to work in conjunction with. And what that means is if your door is between 7/8 and 1.25 inches thick, you need a 4-inch hinge. Okay? The fact that this will measure 4-inch is certainly related, but it's really the thickness of the door. And the -4 in the part number means it's a 4-inch. So that same logic, if you had an 1.5-inch door, 1.5-inch thick door, an 1.75-inch, 4-inch would not be for you. You'd have to look for the 5 or the 6-inch hinge. Now, the 603 stands for zinc plated. Now, zinc plated is very nice because a couple of reasons. First of all, it is inherently corrosion resistant. So if this was let's say a door to the kitchen in a restaurant and you've got dishwashing and all the high moisture sort of operations that occur inside of a kitchen, I think zinc is a great option because of that reason. It is also a silver finish, and it is a silver finish that doesn't include the same sort of additional charge that you would have if you were ordering this in satin chrome. Satin chrome, oil rub bronze, certain satin nickel, certain finishes are significantly more expensive than prime coat, zinc, black Japan. So this will give you that look as well. Let's say it's the poor man's satin chrome, like poplar is the poor man's cherry if it was a wood analogy. Anyway, the point of the matter is order it either for economy or for the fact that it's zinc plated for corrosion resistance, whatever the need is. Now, let's get into some of the particulars about what this hinge is intended to do. First of all, this is a double acting spring hinge. And the way that a half surface double acting spring hinge works is, well, obviously your door is going to sit into this cavity in here. Okay, it's going to swing in and out. This is the leaf that obviously mounts to the face of the door. The leaf back here is the leaf that mounts to the jamb. Okay, and right now, of course, everything is spring tension set on the hinge. And I should say, prior to moving forward, this hinge is available in all of those finishes mentioned and others. So if you have need for a different finish, feel free to reach out to us. So the way that this operation will work is the door will be pushed out this way and then spring back, possibly like this, and find center again based on the spring tension. Now, before we get into the application of this hinge, let's talk about first what it's engineered for. We discussed earlier that 4-inch hinges are for 7/8 to 1.25 thick doors, so that's very crucial. And that makes the 4-inch a little bit less common, although when you have a half surface hinge like this, and half surface means that one leaf will apply to the door, is what it means. You have full mortise, half surface, half mortise hinges, but if there's a half involved, the next word applies to the door. So half mortise would be mortised to the door, not surface mounted. Anyway, half surface hinge, you can get away with an odd sized door or something unusual you'll see people do because they know they can screw right to the face of the door. Anyway, 7/8 to 1.25 we know so far. Now, this is going to be appropriate for doors, 60-pound doors, up to 6'8", or pardon me, 6'8", 7 foot. Really nothing less than that, because what happens is you might have a door too small or light for this hinge. When you're up to 2 foot 4-inch wide, they're looking at 2 hinges. When you get to a 75-pound door or up to a 3-foot door, they're looking for 3 hinges. So that's a guideline. I would always opt towards more spring hinges rather than less, because it will allow you better control over the opening, because you can control that spring tension. Of course, within its engineered limits. I think about 3 tension holes are what they recommend. on these, on the setting of the tension. If you hear significant cranking or creaking as you open the door, that's that spring contorting, so you don't want to do that. You'd back it off. And in that sort of case, you'll probably see that the door will sag, or at least it will go through its cycle, but more of an oval cycle where it will actually leave the opening as it, is cycling open and closed, possibly hitting the jamb. That is certainly evidence that you need to add an additional hinge. Looking at the rest of the extended description before we move on to the installation instructions, which are below this video, what you're seeing is door flange is surface applied to the face of the door. The jamb flange is surface applied to the jamb, obviously a cased opening frame. This is just going to surface mount right onto the cased opening frame. Do not use on doors with a beveled edge. For the hinge side, you're going to need that edge inside of here to be square edge, so your door doesn't sit at 3-degree open or closed. You'll want that to be a square edge door. Packed with all wood screws, that's typical for what this hinge is going to include. I've had people insert sex bolts here by coming up with their own sorts of way to attach the hinge to a door. They might have an unusual door, something made of steel or maybe something hollow core. Permits the door to open in either direction and automatically return to the closed position. And the balance of information there is not incredibly germane to this video. So there are 3 links below this video. First one, let's move on. The first one is to a document called Template, and that is a handy reference because, well, it gives you all of the dimensional properties of this hinge. What you're seeing here is, you've got like the height of the barrel is where that 4-inch comes from, and it's quite frankly not even referred to on the drawing. So that's how less significant the height of the hinge is compared to the door thickness, which is mentioned on the template. What's handy about that is you can see in the upper right hand corner the .182, the 3/16 of an inch, that they're saying all of this stacks up to require. So that gets you into position of starting to think about what your net door size will be, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Moving on to the installation instructions, along with the link to technical specifications. Now, really, the link that we're calling technical specifications is what's included with the package. Okay. Now, that link to what we're calling install instructions is certainly a very handy document as well, and let's look at that first. That one is a real straightforward sort of unit to look at. What the takeaway is from the installation instruction link is showing that if you've got 3 hinges on the door, put 2 up at the top. Okay, 3-inch from the top of the door to the first hinge, 2-inch below this and its second hinge, 1 hinge down at the bottom, about 7-inch off the bottom of the door. That's the takeaway if you're doing 3 hinges. So let's get rid of that drawing, let's get rid of the cut sheet, and let's jump the template drawing. Let's look at technical specifications. So reviewing that, let's go through it because there will be things here that are important. Upper right hand corner, remove spring tension from each barrel by inserting the tension rod, which is included, into the tension adjustment hole, which is this tension collar. You've got them on both sides, or both barrels of the hinge. Rotate in the direction of the arrow as shown on figure 2 and remove the tension pin. This hinge, when it comes, will likely not have any tension set. You'll get tension pins, you'll need 2 per hinge. Bommer is very good at never missing tension pins, so inspect that immediately. Don't wait for it to be on the job site for a week. Bommer's doesn't shed much pity for people that call a month later and say my tension pins weren't shipped. Anyway, there's an arrow on here that shows the direction that you're to turn the tension collar to, and that's to set the tension. Well, if your tension pin is already in there, you're going to rotate that, pull the pin out, and then you can set that back. So release the tension if it's already set. Locate the hinges as shown in figure 1, and that's down below, or that link to the installation instructions, 1 and 1, or 1, 2, and 3, if you're doing it that way. If you are doing a pair of doors, Bommer wants you to place the hinges on the door and frame with the tension collar pointed towards the top on one door and then pointed towards the bottom on the other door. They have found that they've got greater predictability of those doors operating and coming to closed in situations like that. That's what they want to have happen. Moving on to step 2, locate your 3 hinges as shown in figure 1. We got that. Step 3, align the center line of the door with the center line of the frame and secure the frame leaf. So what they're saying is the center line of the hinge, the leaf that's going to be attached to the jamb, needs to be the center line of the door as you're going to install it. Okay? You're going to do that for all the hinges. Literally attach the leaf to the frame at this point. So you'll be looking at it this way, attaching that down to the center line of your cased opening frame, and then of course that hinge opens back this way towards you. Then what we had just talked about, for best alignment, mount hinges on one door with the tension adjustment up and down on the opposite door, should that be necessary. Shims may be necessary under the doors of the frame, flanges for door alignment. You could have a very small or imperceptible amount of toe to the cased opening frame, and if you do, it'll become very obvious if those doors are not at 0 degree to each other, so you might have to play with that to get them perfect. That's normal. Now, moving on. Spring tensioning instructions. Do not exceed 5 holes of tension. So, that doesn't really come into the steps that we're going, but large print font, 5 holes of adjustment, meaning that you can only expose an additional 5 holes from the starting point for tension setting. Let's get the doors hung. Place door in closed position. Wedge the door up from the floor until it is plumb. Insert the tension rod into the tension adjustment hole. Okay, you've got to get this. You got to get the door attached first. So get the door put in place in the opening. Bring it up. Mark your holes. Make sure your margin everywhere is correct. And again, 3/16 of an inch. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. Let's talk about it now. The question is, what is the net size of the door? Well, that's an important question. How do you go about determining that? Well, it's going to be based on you doing one door or two. You know that you've got 3/16 of an inch that you have to allow just for the hardware, and you might allow a 1/4 inch or a 30-second heavy, 7/30 seconds, something like that, a little bit heavy over there. I have found. Then, if it's a single door, what will you allow on the opposite end? Maybe a 1/4 inch. It really depends on the door thickness. But it also depends on whether or not you are leaving it square edge or if you are going to do a radius on the edge of the door. If you do a radius, keep in mind you're going to have a 3/16 margin on the hinge side. You might want to have 3/16 on the other side as well. If you radius the door, you can technically achieve a tighter gap between the doors than that, but you might want it to be the same. And the truth of the matter is, with a 3/16 gap, you're going to be, depending on the door thickness, adequate to get that door to operate. Okay, maybe you're going to leave a 1/4 inch, whatever the case is, depending on the door thickness. That would be what you're going to do to go about sizing the door. So you'll either have a cased opening frame and then need to work backwards. You've got a 36-inch cased opening frame. You know you need 3/16. Let's allow a 1/4 inch. There's your 7/16 dimension. Undersize your door. You might, determine that that's not necessary because of, radiusing the door edge. Okay. Now, you've got the door attached and now it's hung. Now it's time to set the tension. They want those wedges underneath so that your door doesn't fall into the opening like that. At this point, place the door in the closed position, wedge the door up from the floor until it's plumb, insert the tension rod into the tension collar and rotate in the direction of the arrow. And at that point, you see that I reveal those additional holes. And that's where you insert the tension pin. Then, at that point, you can remove the tension rod. Increase the tension on the top hinge if the door sags or if the return action is too slow. The top hinge or the top 2 hinges are really the business end of the door operating correctly. The bottom hinge doesn't do much other than just keep it right in the opening, and that's the point. There's a note, some hinge sizes will have arrows stamped on barrel sides. increase the tension in the direction of that arrow. Pretty much every Bommer hinge that I've seen that's tension related is going to have that degree. The bottom line is this: when the tension collar is pointed up, it's clockwise. On your other door, if you're doing a pair, it would be counterclockwise. Okay, still the direction of the arrow, but it's counterclockwise. The figure 1 doesn't give us any additional information needed for this. The bottom line is, regarding the net door size, most people just use square edge doors. That's the bottom line, and that's very common and typical. You might find that a 3/16 gap on either side is just perfect. You might have to take off a little bit more. You might have to shim it to make it, at 0 degree when it's closed, and that will affect where your door is. You might have to plane it down a little bit more, whatever the case is. This concludes everything that I can think of to talk about this half surface hinge. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo, and right above it says Made in USA, and that's a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer number 3023-4-603 half surface double acting spring hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us.